Hey, Outcasters, welcome back to the town of Rome where everyone is still very, very sad. It's your recap for Season 1, Episode 6 from The Shadows It Watches. We're going to break it down for you, us, this wonderful panel of ABTV's own Boo Radleys. So please, stick with us.
You're tuning into the destination for TV superfan discussion, AFTERBUZZ TV. And now, let the buzz begin.
This feels right.
Right? From The Shadows, Sting watches all of us.
Yeah. I mean, that's better than whatever's watching them this week.
The weird demonic goo monster.
I'll take Sting.
Or creepy Brent Spiner.
Yeah. All the bad.
Can we get at some point before the end of the series, which I hope runs for 10 years, before the end of the series, can we get Brent Spiner doing this, or really any Sting number?
Yeah, I feel like if we write in a personal request, they're gonna be like, you know what, this is exactly what the show is missing.
When we get to
precisely.
Outcast season 6, I want like a jukebox musical episode, and it's all songs by Sting and the Police.
Yes.
Would be amazing. Hi, we're here talking about pop music. I am Lex Michael. I am all over social media at the Lex Michael, and I am here with.
Hi guys, I'm Joelle Monique. You can find me everywhere at Joelle Monique.
Hello everyone, I'm Abby Vega. You can find me at _Abby Vega.
So guys, as alluded to at the very, very top of the show, everyone in Rome is still quite bummed out. But it does seem that whereas last week seemed to be very much about characters receiving information that drastically upsets the worldview that they've clung to, this episode, in my perception of it, was about essentially putting the pieces back together following an event like that. I thought they did a phenomenal job spinning a bunch of plates. I want to know right off the bat, what did you guys think of this episode overall?
Man, I like it because I've been saying for a long time that Reverend Anderson is a narcissist who's vain and has issues, and I'm glad that we finally get to delve into that. I'm glad we get to expose Reverend Anderson for, me personally, the hypocrite that he is. Like, just... I have issues with him.
Yeah, and while everyone is still sad, I did make a note that I was very happy to see Kyle working, and he seemed to, kind of have friends. He was smiling and having, a little lunch break with his work crew.
Considering how big a bummer everyone is dealing with existentially, Kyle included, this is maybe the most well-adjusted we've seen him?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I love this episode, but I specifically I'd like to see that a little bit. I was like, hey, Kyle, even though it ends back where it began.
Yeah.
But
And that does
second.
It does seem a little bit like in picking up some of the pieces that resulted from the fallout last week. It does seem like in some ways, specifically the relationship between Kyle and Reverend Anderson, it seems a little bit like we're back at square one with them almost, but they have now gone through these additional circumstances that give this return to square one a bit more color than they had when they were there originally. But I did want to start by talking about Reverend Anderson because he is the character that when we start the episode, we jump right in and we see him obsessively going through these tapes of his old exorcisms. Yeah. And there's something so almost pitiful about it.
It's performance theater for one, and it's so funny. It's like these giant acts these people are putting on, just flailing their limbs and oh my god, and then having seen what a real exorcism looks like on the show, you just feel bad for him. You're just like, how did you miss it time and time and time? I got from the beginning of the series that there were maybe 15, and it seems like there might be 30, 45, 50.
Okay, that's what I said. I go, how many of these did he do?
And there's a big pile of tapes.
Yeah. A lot of tapes. And it was so sad. He was pretty much torturing himself just seeing how he just completely got deceived by these demons every single time. And I liked that he finally admit, I liked the attention. I liked the praise I was getting. I was so happy to hear that.
He totally has, Reverend Anderson, later in this episode when we see him talking to God, he has this moment that it took Walter White 6 years to have, and Anderson has it in the 6th episode where he finally goes, this thing that I dedicated all of myself to, I told everybody, I even told myself for a while that I was doing it for this higher purpose, for this good altruistic reason, but in reality, he may as well have quoted Breaking Bad and said, I liked it.
Yeah.
I did it for me. I was good at it. It made me feel alive. And it is coming when it does in this episode, after we spend 40 minutes-ish watching Reverend Anderson just bristle so aggressively at the idea that even after everything they've seen, he and Kyle, he can't do this by himself. Like, when he was looking at the tapes, it seemed to me like he was desperate to find some piece of information that would tell him, not even that what he's done wasn't a waste, but that, oh, Kyle isn't that special.
Yeah.
I can do this without him. And additionally, this notion that he wants to prove, or he's desperate to find some indication that this evil they're fighting cannot adapt. Because if this evil can adapt, what could the answer possibly be other than, I have to go back to Kyle?
I honestly don't know if Reverend Anderson got that far as to can this evil adapt. I didn't get the sense that he was looking much further than why is Kyle able to do what he can do and I can't. Like, he's not special.
Right. Oh, that's me. I'm reading way into it. I'm just following it as far as I possibly can, because it's like, well, he was under the impression, right, that he could use, I was going to say traditional exorcism, which sounds a little counterintuitive, but he could use a more straightforward exorcism, as we, even just from watching fiction, an exorcism as we generally understand it. Obviously, that hasn't been effective. And I think, I mean, tell me if you disagree, he's certainly someone who's under the impression that if you're possessed by a demon, we can exorcise you. That's how we do it. If we can't do it that way, what do we do? What do I do? And so that's where I come back to. He's just trying to find anything that could answer that question that isn't go back to Kyle.
I see what you're saying, where he, like, turns to blood magic, it seems like, where he's like, this is the only difference. I have to cut my hand from thumb to palm, by the way, which I was like, that is not going to heal easily well.
Like, a paper cut hurts, man.
Right. I mean, just the thick of your palm just seems like a much easier way to... Anyway.
Yeah.
and freaking out poor Patricia, who shows up to just try and maintain this connection.
Yeah.
Side note, Patricia, this was the first episode that because I actually wrote down, I go, wait, she genuinely seems into him. This was the first episode I didn't get evil vibes from her. I didn't think that there was some ulterior thing. It seems she genuinely likes him. And I don't know if I wasn't paying attention in other episodes, but before this episode, I didn't get that genuine
I feel like
feel.
I misinterpreted her reaction as evil when I think really they were more just desperate.
Yeah.
Like, she was like, I will do anything to stay in this house and make this guy happy so that I can be in a good relationship. And if even part of what her son is saying is true about her, like, just going from guy to guy, like, she found a reverend. Like,
yeah,
Patricia was like, I've upgraded, this is better. And so to see this whole downfall, it really made you feel for her.
Yeah, I just misread that whole situation.
Yeah, and when you get the veil pulled back, you know, when they pull the curtain back on Patricia and who she is, what her life is like, it was a really interesting inversion of, like, what I expected, which is she is potentially dangerous to Anderson. Mm-hmm. When in fact, not physically, but rather emotionally, Anderson is far more dangerous to her.
Yeah.
And, I mean, look, he's unraveling further and further. Who knows how dangerous he could possibly be. We see him get a little more physically aggressive in this episode. Not, thankfully, not towards her.
Yeah, no.
But I think that's, like, one of the things that's really fun about this kind of show is you do question everyone just thinking they could be evil, and then when they're not, you're kind of relieved, like, oh. But then, like, who knows, maybe they'll twist it back now and she ends up being evil. It's just one of those you just never know, which I like.
Yeah, and you really immediately, before you even get the scene with her and her son at breakfast, you get a sense the way that she's being played. There is something, there is a yearning there. There's a yearning for connection, for stability, for love, for this thing that she's chasing. And you hear from her son, she's been through a string of men and it never works out. And she's missing something, and she's, for whatever reason, seems like she's not able to give it to herself. She's looking for it elsewhere. And then you get this moment that just made me go like, dude, no, stop, where she tries to connect with Anderson, and Anderson essentially almost completely blows her off. And then when she doesn't immediately take the hint, his next step is essentially, all right, fine. You want to be around this? Fine, here, check this out. And he shows her the dude in the basement.
I was so confused about who was going to be in the basement. I thought it was going to be a big twist on someone that we already been introduced to or
Me too.
something.
But it took me. We haven't seen. I believe his name is Caleb. Have we seen Caleb
No.
before? I was
No.
like, who is this man?
That's what I was
He's a
saying.
church
I
parishioner.
thought the way they were building it up with like the different shots they were doing and not showing who was in there, I thought it was gonna be someone we knew.
Yeah, and I mean, we'll get more into Caleb, but I like how that twist kind of plays out. But I'm right with you. Just this whole idea of like, this is not. You're losing it, man. Like you're quickly sliding off a ledge to take this. This woman can't help you.
No.
She's not spiritually inclined, man. She just wants to be your girlfriend.
Right, and like, not for nothing, the fact that she is not properly equipped to be a holy crusader doesn't
Nothing
mean
against her.
it doesn't invalidate her as a person.
Not even a little bit.
So you get this moment where he's after she sees that he's got somebody captive in the basement, he's cutting himself in front of her. And then when she, understandably, is a little, a little put off by some of
When
what's
we
happening.
get Kyle, the guy you've been saying can do this.
Yeah.
And not for nothing, right? Like, her reaction isn't, oh God, I have to get away from you now. I'm calling the police. You are horrifying. It's, I don't know how to help, but I want to try to help.
Yeah.
Which is pretty remarkable, I thought.
Yeah, especially this late stage in the game of like, we're in a church, you've kind of kidnapped a guy for all that she can tell, and now you're practicing some questionable religious practices here that kind of would seem demonic to just the outside perspective, and then when he completely just snaps on her, it's like, if you're not going to be supportive, you could just get out. And I'm like, you're done, man. Now you're alienating people.
Yeah.
Like, classic signs of just trouble.
Well, he actually says, he goes, fear gives it strength, and if that's the only thing you bring here, I don't need you. And I'm just like, bro, come on.
He's just losing it.
Like,
He's
dude.
on one right now.
But then,
Yes.
but then, instead of completely bailing and going, all right, well, F this crazy man, she goes to Kyle.
Which is nice. It's the nicest thing she possibly could have done in this moment.
It's like, but is it... It makes me wonder, is she nice to me? She seems nice, but or is it just desperate? It just, I can't tell with her. I grew to like her, though, this episode. Until this episode, I was very indifferent about her. I was kind of like, whatever, she seems kind of weird, and she's super into the Reverend. But this episode, I grew to like her as a character and wanting to kind of know more about her.
Well, and she got to be proactive. You really were only ever able to see her react, and only for very limited windows of time. I think up until this episode, the most proactive thing Patricia did was make a pie. And not that there's anything wrong with making pies. I can't bake. I think being able to make a pie and have it look that aesthetically pleasing is quite an accomplishment.
It really is.
There is, I think, a line of demarcation. There's a step up one takes from making a pie to like joining in the crusade against unholy demons.
There's some steps missing in there.
For sure.
You gotta graduate.
For sure, but since now we intersect with Kyle, I wanted to jump back and talk about Kyle a little bit because, hey, he's got a job. I mean, hey, he was unemployed like a week ago.
But
Yes.
but are we saying he had a job at this point?
Well,
Well,
not even that, but just
fair.
Couple days.
This whole time I felt like Kyle is doing his best. Like, this is how you get to happy kind of facade. Like, I'll do the job, and I'll stop reaching out to the wife, and I'll stop hunting demons, and
But he does send Allison money. Like when he gets paid, he puts cash in an envelope
but
every
as soon
week
as
and
they
tries
get
to.
the envelopes back, he's like, yeah, okay, done with that. Like, he's slowly just killing himself internally so that he can be what he's supposed to be. And I immediately was like, BS, we're gonna get Kyle the Demon Hunter back very soon, and I look forward to it.
I felt bad, though, because to me, I genuinely felt he wants nothing to do with that. He wants to just have a normal life. And obviously he realizes that that's just not going to happen. But to me, he genuinely just seemed to just not want any part of it.
Well, there was a little bit of what read to me like he was blaming himself for what happened with Sherry at the end of the last episode.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Which is, and then I go, well, if he blames himself for that, how, does he still fully hold himself responsible for the state that his mother's in, which is pretty much the same. But it seems like, he's now carrying guilt around along with this sense of failure to be able to adequately combat this threat. So it's like, all right, he literally says, Patricia says, oh, how can you just go and sit in there and not do anything to help? And he says, well, it's better than making it worse. So in the absence of being able to do anything to combat the demons and the goo monster and Brent Spiner, he's going to try to, you know, reach out, but give Allison space, but support, be there for them financially if he can't be there for them physically.
Well, he even says, like, he's like, you know, I'll just, the guy who beat his wife and daughter, like, I'll just be that loner who's on the outside of town and nobody wants anything to do with because he's a bad, scary guy. It just, I don't need this guilt trip from you, Kyle. Like, get better so you can start doing something. This whole, like, I'll just stay over here in my room. It's just like a teenage temper tantrum.
Weirdly self-pitying, and you could almost understand it.
Sure.
But it's weirdly self-pitying, and then he does go the extra mile, and he compares himself to Boo Radley.
I love that reference because that's like my favorite book ever, and I love Boo Radley.
Yeah, but by the way, if you're listening or watching us and you didn't catch the reference, Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird. If you go and watch the movie with Gregory Peck, it's Robert Duvall, actually, a very early Robert Duvall performance as Boo Radley, the perceived as the creepy, strange recluse who actually turns out to be not so bad.
Nice guy.
Which Patricia throws back in Kyle's face.
You're no Boo Radley.
Yeah, Boo Radley turned out to be the hero. Kyle.
It's like mic drop.
She should have snapped her fingers and walked away and just be like, there, done like a giant hair flip.
And you know what?
So ridiculous.
I like the mental image of her getting right in Kyle's face, being like, Boo Radley was a hero, Kyle. And then turning, flipping her hair. The hair hits Kyle in the face, and it's the slow-mo, like in Raging Bull, him taking a punch.
Yes.
He's like, oh.
You can like see the skin like flapping.
And then like you hear on the soundtrack like an ambient whisper that's like, truth. When do I get to direct one of these, guys? But so it seems a little bit like even that by itself may not have been enough. He may have gone inside and sulked it off till morning and just gone back to work. But he wakes up in the middle of the night and is terrifyingly baited outside, where he is whacked in the face with a walking cane.
I freaked out. I was like, Mildred, she's a freak of nature.
Mildred is very weird.
This character. She is so strange and bizarre and like, I don't even know.
And this is why it's like, look, could another actress have conceivably played this part? Sure, I suppose. But to get a Grace Zabriskie in this part, to me, is such a wonderful coup of casting, because you take a character that could be played as just as a creepy old lady, and you make her one of the most, like, she just pops in a way that so few characters on TV I feel do consistently.
Nobody has this kind of range of being childlike women and then completely terrifying in a way that is genuine, like you could harm that person, to being like a weird mischievous demon.
Yeah.
Like it's all over the map, and yet it feels true to this character. And I was sorry to have to say goodbye to her, presumably.
Yeah.
That's what it seems like, because it seems like she overstepped a bit, right? She's on top of Kyle, and she starts to drain him, and she has that line about, oh, I know you weren't supposed to be just for me.
Yeah.
And I'm going like, what?
Who were you
supposed
to be? Who's Kyle here?
That's what I'm saying. A lot of things that she says.
And
Yeah,
then
like
she's-
the fact that the Reverend might do some real damage. I'm like,
I
yo,
was like,
should
what?
you guys be afraid of him?
I
Has he
know.
been doing actual stuff?
That's what I was saying.
So many
So
questions.
many
How did
questions.
you guys read? Because obviously she is pulled off of him by something that we don't see, and I assumed it was Sydney.
That's what I said too.
Because the very next time we see her is speaking to Sydney, and that's where they had this short conversation about, what do we do about the Reverend, and I'll
Yeah.
take care of him, I know how his kind thinks, and she asks him, what about me? And of course the next time we see Mildred,
She is gone.
we know what about her. There's no more Mildred, there's the shell of
He
Mildred.
told you not to mess around, Mildred, and it's clear he's more powerful than you. You got
And
greedy.
side note with Sydney, someone, I forget the name, but someone totally commented on one of the videos predicting or saying that Sydney was living at Norval's, which I didn't even pick up on.
Yeah, no, his car appears in frame.
Okay.
In the last episode, like we're sitting right by Sydney's car. Orville's house is here, and then Kyle's walking back up to
See,
his
I
place.
took that as I didn't get that. I took it as when he went to like creep around in his house,
Sure.
that his car was still just there or something. But
It does seem like he's settled in, because we see him very creepily when Kyle goes out the next morning. He's working on Norval's car, and then goes into Norval's house and starts, washing up and things. He looks very
at home.
But then again, to be fair though, so far this season, Sidney has a habit of just wandering in wherever he wants to.
Even in this episode, he says, "Oh, it's easy for me to get in and out wherever I need to. Like, if I'm gonna be here, I'm gonna be here." So Sidney doesn't. The world is Sidney's home. Okay, where he decides to wipe his feet. That's where he's going.
It's so weird because sometimes Sidney really just seems like, when he was just fixing his car, I'm like, you just seem like a nice neighbor.
He plays a good game.
Yes.
He's got the words down. He knows exactly what, like, that lie. Like, anything of the Grinch, he thought up a lie and he thought it up quick. He's like, I just can't let all this go into storage or the dumpster. He lived out here like a hermit. I gotta take care of my friend.
Sure.
Calm demeanor and his appearance and everything, just so, like, nice guy. But then he turns it on, man.
But you know now Kyle's starting to go,
yeah, this guy.
It's like, this is too peculiar many times in a row for me not to at least cock my head to the side like a puppy a little bit.
Like, what?
Right?
Yeah.
But the weirdness aside, it seems like Kyle is on, if not a fulfilling path, at least he is trying. And we see him working, and we see Megan comes, visits him at work, but she is apparently still been talking to Allison, and Allison doesn't want the money, gave it all back. She, appreciates it, but it's not yet.
It's not the right time. We're working on it. We're rebuilding.
And then Kyle's life is just awful. He goes back to work and he has this hallucination. He's got the tar bucket, and then he of course hallucinates the tar bucket coming to life, like the goo stuff, which of course prompts him to walk off his job. Which is why Abby earlier, like, does he still have a job? Probably not.
Probably not.
Probably
like,
not.
I went out on a whim for you.
His supervisor's like, I took a chance, and blah, blah, blah. And Kyle's like, whatever, bro. Pieces.
You don't know what I suffered through. I feel like that guy might give him a second chance. He felt like, he looked like he was like, I don't know how to reach this kid. I don't know how to help him. He's hurting. If I can't get through to him, I have to let him go today. So I don't know. Maybe he can get a shot. I read a lot of that guy's performance. I thought it was really good.
I hope so. Right? I would like to see Kyle not lose his job immediately, if only because just one thing that's not horrible.
Yeah.
I'm not even expecting a nice thing to happen to anyone anymore. I will settle for one not awful thing.
I know. Him and his buddies can't, like, having a little banter over sandwiches at lunch. It just was the most normal thing I've ever seen him do.
It seems like it maybe took a little bit more out of him than it would you or I, but he actually, like, smiled and laughed a little bit.
He did.
Which is great, and he has these moments even with Megan where it seems like he's very gradually crawling back out of himself in a positive way,
with her and stuff,
and joking, and she has that moment where she's like, "Oh, you're so weird," and as he's walking away, going back to work, she says that she loves him, and he says it back, and it's nice. It's like, hey, look, there's the guy. There's hints of the guy that everyone who knows Kyle seems to remember is there that
like
we haven't gotten to see.
Allison fell in love with, everything, and I'm like, Kyle.
But of course, when Kyle bails on his job, he goes to the church, and then he and the good Rev get into their little lovers tiff.
Can we give Trisha Brock kudos for that really low angle shot on the church? Like, it's not the in the front of the church where it's just Kyle and Reverend Anderson. That shot is so beautiful, and it looks like it's a straight up comic book panel. Like, it was really like that nice, tall, kind of wide top of the page panel. I liked it a lot.
There were a lot of Trisha Brock, who directed this episode, brought a lot to it. And obviously, when you're directing for television, you're really not supposed to put too much of a stamp on it. You're basically brought in to keep it consistent. I mean, you have to do your work, but you're essentially meant to keep it consistent. But within that, if you're a skilled enough director, there's a lot of room to play. And I thought a lot of the little touches that she brought to the table were excellent touches like that, but also, like, for example, like, this is a perfect the scene between Anderson and Kyle, the way she's able to ratchet up the tension between these two guys, the way she's able to, it does get a little physical with Anderson, actually starts shoving Kyle a little bit, but the way that even these two guys, their words feel a little bit like they are physically hitting each other. The way that she cuts around them or chooses not to cut around them, I think, is crazy, crazy effective. But to watch these two guys go at it, because this is as close, I think, unless next week they're just literally beating each other to death.
I can't.
This is them fighting. Yeah. I mean, they're not either one of them are aggressively physical people, although you wouldn't know it having watched Kyle like punch the little boy a whole bunch.
Right, or Reverend Anderson seems to get like just his top blows quickly, like hit him last episode, or like he's so unstable, and it's scary, and it's also a little bit frustrating because for a guy who talks so much to God and feels so close to God, like you're living a pretty biblical story here. Like God doesn't give you what you want, he gives you what you need. And the fact that you have the tool to stop and prevent all of the things you've been trying to stop and prevent now, and that you're just looking this gift horse in the mouth, you're like, no, I don't want him, I want the power. It's like, but he's yours to pretty much direct and aim as you see fit. Like, you're taking him to these places, you're making sure he uses his power for good. Without you, there really isn't. Kyle just kind of is adrift in the wind. You gave him purpose. And it's so frustrating to sit like from the sidelines and watch him continuously like just be such a hypocrite. Like, it's just so annoying. Get in there, see what you have.
And he's I mean, Anderson's tough because it's hard not to see his point of view a little bit, but it's also very hard as a total third party, as an audience member, not looking at the set of circumstances surrounding him, just going like, dude, just like sit on the stoop for a little bit, like have a Fanta, or like, you know, or like apparently he's taken up smoking again. We see him light a cigarette later. Just have a smoke or something. Take a deep breath, because it just seems like all day Anderson has just been blowing people off left and right. First it was Patricia, then he talks to Chief Giles briefly and is basically like, hey, so my work didn't go so well. And Giles is like, hang on, what? Because Giles actually seems to know what's going on.
He's like, you have a lot of those though, right? He's
It was like, well,
I don't even know.
Get out of here. And Giles is like, what? He's like, nah, and Anderson just goes back in the church. So he's been doing this all day. So then when Kyle shows up, that's the thing too, is like Kyle shows up and he can't blow Kyle off.
Yeah.
Kyle won't allow it to happen. So when they finally have it out, it's cathartic, and it's also a little bit like, where does this stop? Are they going to be able to actually find a happy medium, or does this just keep building and building and building to a place where they can't what's the expression? They can't put the teacup back together, as it were. But then thankfully, big dude breaks out of the basement, and they're both given a point of focus that they can share. And
although Reverend doesn't even want to share that.
He really doesn't. He's really like, no, get away, he's mine.
I know.
He's mine. Oh my
gosh. Kyle doesn't want him. Like, Kyle doesn't want to do this.
He would just like to not die.
That's the difference. That's like the difference between Kyle and Reverend. It's like Reverend feels like he needs to do this in order to like prove to himself who he is. Kyle doesn't even want this at all.
Right.
And Reverend at that point was making it seem like Kyle was trying to take something from him. And Kyle's like, I know.
Yeah.
Like, I wish I didn't have this power, but I do. So.
And obviously whatever Anderson's going to do on his own is not effective, but then pretty quickly Kyle does, it looks like he's doing like a Yoda from Attack of the Clones, where he just puts up his hands like, like this. And even Kyle, the look on his face is a little bit like,
this is happening.
All right, what's going on? As the goo monster leaves Caleb, I believe is his name, and it's gone.
It's like almost like Kyle didn't even like try. It just happens.
There does seem to be a natural kind of magicians-esque, like, I'm making things move. What is happening? And yet, is this the first time we've seen it happen where Kyle's kind of still conscious for it? Because it happens with his mother, but he like kind of passes out before the whole thing goes down, and then it happens with.
I thought Joshua, he was aware.
Isn't he?
Yeah. He's got Josh, and then the chick that's in a coma now.
Yeah, sure.
He's kind of aware for it. But did there seem to be something a little different about this one?
Well, I think most of the time he's touching them physically when it's happening, right?
He did put his hands on
Caleb.
His
shoulder for a second.
But for like a second. But was it? I could be totally wrong. I just watched this. I don't know. But like I thought. He wasn't actually physically touching when the stuff came out.
No, he wasn't.
That's what I'm saying. I thought every other time he was.
What felt distinctly different to me, because I agree, this definitely felt like a departure from the other situations they've been in that are similar to this one. Even though he wasn't quite sure how he was doing what he was doing, or at least that's how I read it, he seemed very much in control of it in a way that he never has before. Like, he's gradually coming into greater command of these abilities that he has without, obviously, unfortunately, coming into a greater understanding of them. Yeah. but they actually get the goo thing out, and I'd be a little concerned if all I saw it do was, float up into the rafters of the church and disintegrate. I'd go, I'm pretty sure we shouldn't stand right here anymore. I'm pretty sure we should go outside for at least
Mildred
an hour.
Can definitely come in here and go as she pleases. So it's clear that the church is not sanctified. It's not protected from whatever these beings are. So
I would at the very least let the church air out for a little bit. You know what I mean? Like, let's open a couple windows.
Mildred going in there. Sydney's I feel like he's super bad, and he was able to get in the church.
That is true, too.
Fine,
He's right in the back.
Yeah, and he just hangs out there. But we see too, like these aren't, they're not demonic entities like they're not the demon Pazuzu from The Exorcist. You know what I mean? They aren't bothered by being around the cross, clearly, because they can hang out in a church. They're not bothered by an exorcism, as we've seen.
Which made that scene with Caleb really interesting. Once everything was out and he's just sitting on the bench talking with the Reverend.
This was fascinating.
I don't know, did you get the quote down? I wrote it.
Which specifically?
The one, but I didn't feel any torment. I felt this warmth, and I figured it was just the sun, but then I felt like there was a hole being drilled in the top of my head, and the warmth poured into me from the hole and filled my whole body, but I wasn't afraid. Rev and I have been coming here every Sunday my whole life because I was afraid of dying, afraid of going to hell. I'm not saying you're not doing good work here. I can't go up there on Sunday and tell these good people that you should be afraid. Not anymore. Thank you, Reverend.
Yeah.
There's so much to unpack in the, couple of sentences. First of all, if you started feeling it when you were looking out the window, Kyle is not touching you or near you. Did the thing just sense Kyle and was like, whoops, gotta dip. Gotta get out of here. This guy can do bad things.
Right.
And then the whole idea that this isn't scary. It isn't terrifying when that seems to be the only, little boy was afraid for probably obvious reasons. Possession, terrifying. We know that his mom, who's in a coma, but clearly somewhat semi-conscious still because she cries after that visit with Sydney.
Right.
This is obviously a horrible experience for her. But what does it mean for that guy to feel warmth? And does it explain guy with a shotgun from 2 weeks who was living in the pet store?
Right.
Who talked about, the way he talked about his possession made me feel like he lost it. Like he didn't have that thing that was making him whole anymore. So what is it doing to these people?
It does seem, and this goes back to one of the, maybe episode 3 or 4, there are conversations where we get the hint without it being explicitly stated that there's more than one kind of this creature. So I'm wondering, for example, when the possessing entity leaves Caleb, it seems to still leave Caleb where he is.
That's what I was just about to bring that up, because we were wondering, both his mother and Sherry, right after he took the demon out, they're in that state where they're not really even alive anymore.
Right.
But then Joshua was fine after, and it seems that Caleb is just himself again now. So there has to be some sort of different kind of demon that affects when it's actually taken out of them, how they respond to that.
Right.
I don't know if it's like a length thing of how long they've been or what that is, but because he seemed to be himself, right?
Yeah.
More or less. I mean, obviously having gone
yeah.
through something very profound and very altering, and that too is not only is it hard enough to fight these demonic entities directly, but now we've got somebody that we saved, and he's basically choosing of his own volition not to stand with us.
Well, and the thing is, it seems unclear as to whether, is he just no longer afraid of hell and what comes next? He's like, it's not scary. Which, he's like, maybe it's not ideal, but I'm not terrified of it anymore. Maybe that's the perspective he's coming from, and I don't want to deal with fire and brimstone kind of preaching. Or was it more of, it doesn't seem like he's satanic. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's not like he's, shuffling off to worship the devil. And I don't, the whole thing is very muddy and unclear. And the fact that he thanked the Reverend afterwards. Mm-hmm. He was there and kind of helped perform the exorcism. Why thank him?
Right.
It's very confusing and a whole lot. And then with what Mildred has been giving us little bits and pieces of throughout the show, I feel like we are not any clearer on what these things are, where they're from.
No, and the other thing, too, is if you are not possessed by one of these demonic entities, and you're not somebody who has the benefit of being able to watch the show and get context for everything everybody says, I'm pretty sure that even if you know he means well, Reverend Anderson probably increasingly is coming off like a belligerently crazy asshole.
Oh, yes.
So I almost can't blame this dude for going, thanks, but I'm good.
No,
Yeah.
I don't want any part of this.
I'm going to be literally anywhere else. Nothing good happens here.
Yeah.
I'm taking my family. I'm moving to a different town. I'm going to go to Charlotte. Rome is sad and awful. But yeah, he goes off. But this sequence of events seems to have made something in Kyle's brain click into place a little bit differently. And he finally concedes, I think, both to Anderson and, more importantly, to himself, that he can't run from this.
Yeah.
That as long as he refuses to face it head on, his family can't possibly be safe.
Yeah.
But he does tell Anderson, you know, when we're in your church, that's your domain. Obviously, you call the shots. But if we're going to do this together, you and me, we're going to do it my way.
Which at this point, thank God. Like, somebody had to take the wheel.
But I think that's where you were talking about whether or not they're going to be able to, like, put the pieces back together. I think this is going to where their relationship is still going to falter. I think Reverend Anderson is going to have way too much trouble not being in charge.
I'm going to come back to that in predictions.
Okay.
Come back to that in predictions.
But it does definitely shift the power balance in their
yeah.
relationship.
Yeah.
Because whereas before it definitely seemed like if Kyle was the wind-up car, Anderson was the one who aimed him and pulled him back and let him
Yeah.
go. Now it seems very much like we're still partners, but I'm going to be... The metaphor doesn't totally work. I'm going to be the one pulling myself back and letting myself go. You get it.
Yeah.
Well, no, but even... it feels like we're going to be getting tables turned on us as to who really holds the power here. Because if they're afraid of Reverend Anderson and Cindy's like, oh no, I have a plan for him.
Sure.
What has he been doing?
Yeah,
like I refuse to believe that he put all this time and energy, and what we saw today in the videos was obviously like, okay, he missed something, but I doubt that he wasted his entire life up until this point. He must have been doing something, and he's definitely got them on the run. So I think we're going to see more from Reverend Anderson.
No, yeah, and we also said that even though he didn't fully get the demons out of them, he did something to the demons that changed the way that they were doing something. So he definitely was doing something. I just think even when he was watching the videos, maybe he was trying to figure that out too a little bit. Like, I know I did something, but what is it?
Yeah.
Or what did he miss?
Sure.
And then
There's something off.
I was going to make a bad joke. I was going to say, well, you can't miss the pentagram on his chest.
No!
It's right there, all bloody and gross. And if you read the comics, we got a really cool reveal of this. We don't see the actual action of the carving happening. It's just Reverend Anderson opening his shirt, and you're like, what happened? This giant scarring. So to actually see it in the show was simultaneously horrendous and fascinating. Like, first of all, Sidney is fast with a knife.
Oh, yeah.
He was like, I've got
that was
this
quick.
straight down. I know exactly what I'm doing. I felt bad for Patricia's son having to be outside and watching this whole thing.
And I feel like no good comes from him seeing that.
No.
Witness at all.
Not at all.
I do not want to see
So
Sidney.
bad.
Especially when his whole deal so far has been, and in his scene at breakfast with his mom, has been you always get involved with a guy, and the guy turns out to be, in his words, turns out to be a dick. This is based on how you perceive what he is seeing. If you're the one seeing it, this is several orders of magnitude more severe than just being a dick.
Oh, yeah.
So how that is going to continue to play out, I am not certain, but I have thoughts. But before we get to our thoughts, there's still some threads that we need to touch on really quickly before we run out of time. Chief among them, we have the return of Donnie to Megan's narrative.
You know that was coming.
Yeah, and this guy.
Donnie needs a slap upside the face. Like,
Well, he got a few, and it doesn't seem to have helped him.
He needs a slap from me. Like, I just want to wind up and pitch right across his face. How dare you blackmail this? Like, you're lucky all you got was a beating. Like, you're lucky. He's like, I'm going to have seizures. I don't care.
But whoa, what a beating.
Yeah.
I knew that it was pretty rough, but the fact that he's still in the hospital, I don't know how much time has passed, but still he maybe has brain damage. I was like, dang, Mark went at him.
He's
good for you,
apparently
Mark.
Yeah,
and it's a little bit like, okay, do we know, well, do you guys believe him, or do you think that could be something he's saying to garner sympathy?
By the look of his state,
That's true, he doesn't look good.
he doesn't look good. But just with how he is as a person, you see him trying already to like manipulate and blackmail. It makes you question it a little. At this point, I don't think that he's lying or making it up.
Right.
But I mean, he doesn't
book,
have good character at this point.
Yeah,
So.
in the comic book, you see Mark beat him up. Like, it's implicit. It's not a question. So I think that, yes, he did.
Well, if he doesn't actually have these potential lifelong conditions, then it's like, okay, well, if his leverage is threatening to hire a lawyer, you wouldn't have that leverage if you'd hired a lawyer and the lawyer was like, but you're lying.
Yeah, and it's like, regardless if he has brain damage or not, he still got beat up super badly by a cop on duty who pulled him like. So that doesn't even matter. Like, no matter what, he could hire a lawyer just for the fact that he did that. So.
Right. And so essentially the ultimatum he gives is it's going to go one of two ways. And it's either, he says, I really was just here to sell tires. But the story the story can either be I had a little too much to drink and got into a scuffle outside a bar with some locals. Oh, darn, I just couldn't get a good look at him. Or I tell him the truth and Mark goes to jail. Either way, we're going to have some fun. And by the way, ew.
Yeah, you sick.
I am so curious to what exactly he's trying to...
I really think he just likes torturing Megan. Like, I just think that, like, he kind of gets off on that and the fact that, like, now I get to hold part of your life in my hands.
Exactly.
Into my control again.
It's possession and control.
Yeah,
and it's
creepy.
I think it's certainly his desire certainly extends to possessing and controlling her physically, but in lieu of that, I think this dude is twisted enough that he will settle for being able to possess and control parts of her life.
Well, and to take down her white knight. Like, if he can, like, make that guy go away, I think he feels like he has a much better chance at her. I can't wait till something bad happens to him. I don't know if something bad happens to him, but I'm just waiting for it in my soul. It's going to be good.
And then I do want to touch really briefly on Mark and the Chief, because Mark tracks down the girl whose fingernail was found at the camper. She tells him essentially nothing of use, but then we see her going to meet with Ogden on his nice, riding lawnmower. And essentially Ogden says, okay, well, I already took care of the camper. Don't just basically keep your head down and I'll take care of this. And of course we get another really long lingering shot on Ogden to end the scene, although this time he swears.
Well, and we get that peek of wifey.
Yeah.
It's gotta be wifey who's like, oh no, I know all about this jive and don't appreciate it, which makes me wonder, is Ogden possessed?
That's what I was thinking.
It's because we get a change in personality. We get him dating the girl, which seems outside of his personality, and we get the police chief who's like, "You being weird. Like, you might be my best friend, and I don't understand what this is going on." This is all classic signs of possession within the show.
That's what I had as a prediction.
And obviously we saw the way the dog reacted to Ogden a couple episodes ago. Yeah. So Chief gets a good run around this episode, basically being blown off left and right by people. But when I did think it was interesting that when Kyle finds Mildred dead on the porch and Giles shows up, he wastes no time. He immediately starts needling Kyle a little bit. I'm like, bro, stop.
I know.
He's a police. He's inquisitive. He's got to know the answer.
But he also talks about, like, Anderson said, like, you've got a special knack for this thing that he does. And I do really like how the show keeps implying very, very, very heavily that Chief Giles knows quite a bit more about what's going on than he talks about. How much he himself totally buys into it, I don't know. Or is it just Anderson seems to have had some success helping crazy people, so I'll let him keep helping crazy people. I don't know.
Yeah.
But the big detail in that scene that I thought was real interesting was when he goes into Mildred's house and he finds a picture of the camper.
Yes. And I don't even know what to think about it at this point, but I was like, what?
Yeah.
Cahoots. They're in cahoots.
Cahoots.
Just too much.
Is that
I mean,
you're calling it right now? Cahoots.
Why else is the fire chief showing up at this dead woman's house?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, you don't need to be here.
And then he looks out and he sees Ogden outside. And
that's what makes me think he's possessed too.
For
He's in with
sure.
the demon.
So, all right. So we've touched on a lot, and now I think we're getting into a point where we just need to start speculating wildly. Yes. So let's move in to predictions.
I'll go first. I have really just quick ones because I pretty much already talked about them. So I wrote down that I think Ogden is possessed at this point. There's something going on weird with him. And clearly the chief seems like a good guy. I don't think that this would be his best friend if he had always been like this and sketchy and weird. So totally think that. Bad things I feel like are coming from Megan and the Chief. Those are the two people at this point that I am the most worried about. And that's all I'm gonna.
Very quickly, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers with Reverend Anderson and Kyle. I think that we're gonna see their powers like line up within the next episode. We started getting a lot of parallels between them in this episode, including Kyle at the top of the show throwing his beer, and then Reverend at the end throws his bourbon. And we have a lot of other, like, you know, they're both kind of blowing people off and trying to play their, like, really hard into the roles that they know they're supposed to be, but aren't quite filling. I'm really hoping that next episode we get a combination of their powers, whatever the Reverend has been doing to help, mixed with Kyle now having a little more control over his powers.
Yeah.
Maybe actually start healing some people.
Sure. I second that, and I'm actually going to second both of your predictions because I do also think that the two people we should be most concerned about at this point are the Chief and Megan, and I really, especially Megan, because it's the one person who's close to Kyle that has not been touched by this yet and could be used most effectively to hurt him.
Yes.
But also, now that you've drawn this line between these characters and the Power Rangers, if this season doesn't climax in a really big kaiju fight, I'm going to be super disappointed. So thanks for that. I think that's going to do it for us, unless you guys have any final thoughts for this week. I think that is going to do it for us. So where can people find you guys online?
Hey guys, I'm Joelle Monique. Catch me this week, Black Girl Nerds. We're going to be covering Comic-Con and mostly the premiere of Star Trek, so check it out.
I'm Abby Vega. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at _Abby Vega.
And I am Lex Michael, all over social media at the Lex Michael. We are going to be off next week. We're all going to be places. Some of us are going to be at San Diego Comic-Con. We're planning on doing a meetup if you guys are there. If not, we're going to see you in 2 weeks' time. We're going to be covering the next 2 episodes. We're looking forward to that. In the meantime, please go like us, subscribe us, rate us 5 stars. Tell everybody how much you love us. We love you guys. We will see you in 2 weeks.
Bye, guys.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.